So today we're talking to Gustav Hoegen, who is the founder of the Biomimic Studio and an Animatronics FX artist from London. Gustav has been working as an animatronics designer on films such as The Brothers Grimm, Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Ridley Scott's Prometheus. And most recently, he's running the Creature FX department for the new series of Star Wars movies. Hey Gustav, it's great talking to you. Thanks so much for taking the time. We've been sharing your content over the past few weeks and it's been extremely popular. Yeah, people have been really engaged with it, and it's a big honor to talk with you. And I think the community is going to be very excited to learn more about your work. And as you know, we've been asking the community to ask and come up with questions to ask you. And there are some really interesting questions in there. So we've been filtering out the ones that we think are most interesting. And I'm just going to start asking them. Are you ready?
Go for it, yeah. And,
so I think that the first question that I also had is, how on earth did you get into this field?
many sides or many factors to it. Obviously, it's first of all, my interest in the medium or in fantasy films started from a very early age. I think it's as early as 6 years old when I saw, I think it was Return of the Jedi. Before that, Walt Disney movies, just everything that had to do with trickery and illusions. Not magic, I'm not a magic fan, but just film illusions. Yeah. I was always fascinated how they could physically make something that realistic with their hands. Mm-hmm. And that sort of evolved into an interest into the more like creature effects side, prosthetics, basically everything that has anything to do with practical effects, even down to designs, you name it. But so it was a very broad interest in it, and only I think sort of very early in my career it started to focus into creature effects. But to answer your question, how I got into it is basically my dad was very good in that. He had a producer friend from Canada, and she said, well, your son wants to work in film business, which I wanted from a very that was definitely my goal. But how to get into it, being raised in Holland, where there's no industry to speak of, maybe a few companies who are doing very well in their own right, but as it's not a very established business. So she said, well, you either have to go to America or go to Britain or London. And I was quite surprised. I was like, that's amazing. So I applied for a college there, at an art college, which was 3D model design, product design, and then you make a tangible model of it. Yep. And I think that what that college did for me was sort of open the doors to the industry. Not necessarily as giving me a job, but it sort of made me aware of what was going on in England. And that was a real sort of pivotal moment, because I realized that all the big American productions were being made in England. So I got into that college, and after a year or so, I did work experience for a few companies. But then the big jump came after 2 years when I finished my course, was to actually make the decision not to go back to Holland and just try my luck in London and just knock on doors. And basically I said, well, I'll sweep the floor for you. Yeah. And that is a good way to get into it. I would advise anybody not to be too cocky. Some people get lucky. Some people might, land a job on a Harry Potter film as a trainee. Yeah. The problem is, though, that it comes very fast to those people, and they maybe after 1 or 2 Harry Potter films, or you name it, whatever big production, they go out in the wide world and expect to get paid a certain amount, and they're in for a hard reality, basically. Yeah. They say, well, what can you do for that money? Yeah. So I worked on this and this and this. What can you actually do? So I advise anybody to stay humble at the beginning. Just do any job, because they're doing you a favor, and you do them a favor by doing the lesser jobs. It's everybody starts at the bottom, I think, and it would be very unhealthy not to. So that's how I pretty much got into it.
All right, that makes sense. And so one of the when you say you just start, what were like the first type of projects that you were? Were you already like working on mechatronics, those types of things, or like what was like the start basically?
The start was I did work experience first, and it varied from stop frame animation, set building, or vehicles to
Yeah.
costume, just anything to get my foot in the door. And I didn't really mind what it was.
Mm.
It was model making. They could make me do whatever, set, build, whatever. I don't care. But my actual foot in the door was at a company called Artem, which does at the time did miniatures and special effects were mainly commercial.
Mm.
And that was a great learning school. You know, a lot of the freelancers would move through this company and with all their, you know, exceptional skills. So I learned a lot from that, and it was also a very varied amount of work. You know, one day you would do commercial,
Yeah.
the next week you'd be doing exhibition, the week after you'd be doing you name it, a film. You know, so a lot of projects were thrown at us, and a lot of different disciplines, like model making, like sculpting, like mold making, and then slowly a bit of animatronics.
Yeah, one thing I can imagine, because there's the learning curve is so high, because you have basically a lot of stuff is one-offs, I can imagine. So you just have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah,
cool.
pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, did you ask how I eventually got into animatronics, or the second question or not?
Yeah, so the you can elaborate on that.
Yeah. Basically, I think that was a gradual thing. Because my original interest was to design things, you know, and I did find, with no disrespect to the trades, model making was very much like you very tied down to a brief. You know, like you have to make a model of a who knows, a cassette deck or whatever. You know, we're talking about late 90s, so they still existed then. So it was quite regimented. You know, these are your perimeters, and I felt there was no real creativity in a design kind of way. And then I would see people doing animatronics, and I thought, wow, this embodies pretty much everything I enjoy. You know, there's a lot of imagination involved, a lot of thinking, and how you would approach making an animatronic was pretty much entirely up to you. You know, there's some ground rules. You know, it's got to work well. You got to pick the right spec motors, but how you design the mechanism is entirely up to you. And I thought, well, this could really fit me in that way. You know, because I can make stuff, I can design parts, but I can also have a certain freedom in design. So then I sort of gravitated slowly towards it, and from the age of 24, I started to just get hired to do animatronics. And initially, I did my first few at Artem, which were okay, but I think some people saw potential in them and started hiring me as an animatronic technician, and from then on, that's all I did.
Second question.
Yeah.
So obviously there are multiple aspects that are really great about this work. Like I told you before, for me it sounds like one of the greatest jobs in the world to work on these types of projects. But like after you've been working on this for a few decades already, what is for you still the number one thing that gets you excited about what you do?
The number one thing that gets me excited, I think it's if I've been presented with a real challenge, you know, that excites me nowadays. What used to excite me was the prestige of the project, you know, working on a big production.
Yeah.
But after having done several now, I get more excited by being presented with a complicated creature or figure or humanoid to build, you know, with X amount of movements, or you know, where we have to try and push the realism, try new techniques. That excites me now. You know, I've sort of gone a bit full circle to where I started as a young, you know, or an adolescent. Where I was completely fixated with how things were built and the techniques behind it, and it's starting to excite me more and more again. Cool. So I would say that really gets me going now, and on the flip side as well, I'm started obviously my own studio, so the whole business side of it now is a new challenge.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to say that I mastered my craft, because you can take a whole lifetime to do that.
Yeah.
Whoever says that they mastered their craft is lying, or they don't know their craft. So
I agree.
apart from that, I saw running my business as a new challenge, and it definitely is, because I'm not a businessman.
What? Where does your inspiration come from?
My inspiration?
Yeah.
Oh, from many things. I borrow my inspiration from, well, as a kid, it would be very banal. They're not banal, but banal films like B horror movies. You know, the effects, or Nightmare on Elm Street. Of course, the big ones, Star Wars. Alien was a huge inspiration on me, and films like Robocop, just for the hardware, because I love robotics as well. Cartoons like Transformers that were big in my youth, and then I can go the complete other side, and then I admire certain artists, painters. It's all a culmination of many things. I find architecture inspiring as well. Nature, machines, I find visually beautiful to look at. I'm not the engineer in the realm of like what a carburetor can do to a car, or I was always more interested in the aesthetics of machinery, more the visual aspect of it, and later on I realized that I had to make things actually functional and work. So the more pragmatic side came out. But my inspirations, what I said before, and many other things, you find it in so many things. Digital art, you name it, graffiti artists, so much, too much to mention.
Yeah, because that was something I was curious about. Like you mentioned Transformers, which today the Transformers franchise is of course a lot of CGI. I would almost think mostly CGI. But when you look at it, it's aesthetically it's very intricate, and it's there's a lot of mechanics happening there. Is that then still something that inspires you, or that you can appreciate, even though it's not like an actual tangible thing that they built for that movie?
Well, I can very much appreciate it. Just I suppose their holy grail is realism. They got movement down so well that we can't match that. In the time they can make a robot move like it's weightless, etc. That's very hard to achieve mechanically, or if not impossible. The only robots that are convincing that way are the ones you see from Dark or Boston Dynamics that are absolutely phenomenal, but take years to develop, and many prototypes. So we can't match it. But no, I really appreciate what CG artists do. It's in its own right, it's a phenomenal tool, and it's pretty much like infinite how they can develop and improve. I see human heads, they do faces. I go, oh man, that's forget it. That's
it's art. It's an art. It's an art form, I think.
How the nuances they can create, I go, well, forget it. That will be so hard to equal mechanically. We're trying. We're doing our best. But what I envy about CG is that they have control of every millimeter. I assume I'm not an expert, but it seems they can really play with nuances that we can't mechanically convey through skin. Maybe one day, after years of development, R&D, we can get close. But no, it's a very impressive art form. CG, definitely.
Cool. All right. So, can you tell a bit more about the process of developing an animatronic character? So, what phases do you go through when you have to develop a new character?
A new character, well, it always starts really early on. It starts in the script. Obviously, they write in a character, and it gets presented to us. And they say, well, these are its characteristics, and this is the role it plays. Pretty much basically where it would start. From then on, you get a concept designer that gives his interpretation of the creature, and many designs will be rolled out and presented to a production director, you name it, and they will pick one, and then it goes to the Creature FX team, which involves me. And if you have a good team, we all get involved from a very early start, so we can discuss the technicalities of it. And without giving too much away on all the previous Star Wars films, we worked with designers that were also sculptors, so they really understood what is involved in building a creature. So their designs would accommodate that very well. Yeah. And the transition between the design to the sculpt was almost seamless. So people are very lucky when you're in that position. So where was I? Well, design gets presented to a team of creature effects artists including a sculptor, mold maker, an animatronics person like myself, a painter who does, paint scheme, you name it. And then if there's hair required, a hair person, and also a fabricator that will do the suit or all the understructure. That doesn't involve animatronics. It's also a very important part that gets overlooked many times. The people that do all the amazing muscle suits. Just to make it believable. Yeah. So that's one part of the stage, and then it gets handed to the sculptor. That's always the very first part, and they will make either a maquette to get an overall look of the thing. You can have a little puppet-sized version. You can look around it, and it's a really good tool to establish the overall look of it. Is it in proportion? Does it look odd? You name it. Yeah. And then when that's signed off, they commence and sculpt it, and it can be, a rod puppet, or it can be a head somebody's wearing with a costume. So that approach is also very different. It sort of branches out into different techniques. So what I'll do is just stick to a creature suit, a man in a suit. So what we would do to start with, I don't want to keep it too long, but we do a live cast of the performer, and then they will take them all of that, cast it in fiberglass, and that will be our understructure from sculpt on top of, and do creature suit, do the sculpt of the body on top of it, etc. When that's all done, the sculpt, when they're all happy, they make a fiberglass mold of it, take it apart, clean it out, and then give all the parts to the people that need, say, I need the mold of the head, into which I will lay in clay to decide the thickness of the skin, which is a very important part of the animatronic process. You basically decide the cheeks, they're going to be this thick, the forehead's going to be this thick. Yeah. And I think a lot of people underestimate that process because it's crucial. Like our anatomy, we have a lot of tissue here compared to here. Yeah. We do the same in animatronics. So when we move the lips, they look fleshy. And we decide that by laying in a certain thickness, and that will be replicated in either silicon or a foam. So once that's done, I get an understructure we call a core, which is like the skull of the animatronic. And those will create my perimeters from within. I will build my animatronic. Gotcha. And the approach on how to design animatronics is very each to their own, but most people will use AutoCAD or Fusion 360. I personally still like to design it by just doing sketches. I find it more fluent in a way. Because I find computer is fantastic. I wish I knew how to use it better, but I find it more of a barrier between me and the animatronics I produce. I find that I lose fluidity, and I lose the speed I work. Yep. So again, each to their own. So you design the mechanism, put as many or as little servos in the head as you want, or depending on the the space you have or how complex you want to make it. Oh, and a very important thing is that once you get the silicon or the foam skin, you start studying that. And I think a lot of people in that make a mistake that they think you're building a machine, but you're not. You are creating or bringing life to a rubber skin. Yeah. That's the main thing. And it's not to knock anybody, but at the moment with all this emerging techniques, people are very sidelined and very drawn into, this I can 3D print this, or I can do this in like a amalgamation of this material, and they sort of lose the essence of what animatronics is, and just make something come to life realistically. Yeah. And that is the key thing. If you build the most beautiful mechanism that doesn't convey real movement or realistic movement, forget it. You can tell CG it.
Yeah.
So I think the emphasis needs to be a bit more on the artistic side, and if you're a good engineer, it helps because you make it well, but it goes hand in hand. You know? Yeah. So once the animatronic is all built and you're happy how the skin moves, we get to the programming side, and if you're lucky, if you have a very good electronics team in your Creature FX team, then it's amazing, because I work with a programmer, a guy who writes his own software, Matt Denton. He did the algorithms and all the electronics for BB-8. He's a pretty exceptional engineer, electronic engineer, and he's written his own software. He does his own servo boards, and he also understands how animatronics work.
Yeah.
So when you hand it over to him, he's going to do something amazing.
Yeah.
With the movement available, with the he mixes servos, he mixes expressions, he slaves movements together, and it's safe, and on the flip side of that, he does a bulletproof, like, electrical loom and wiring, and he just gets the whole thing, and that's a beautiful thing, just to give it to him. It's safe, it's fantastic. And so he'll program, set all the limits, then we stick the skin on, goes back to Matt Denton, and he'll finish off all the expressions. And that pretty much concludes an animatronic head. It gets painted beautifully. They'll put on hair if needed. Those are the finishing touches, like the cherry on the cake.
Yeah.
And also is extremely important is the cosmetics, which I mentioned, the paint, the hair, that can really make or break a creature.
Yeah, and that happens in your studio as well, right?
In my studio, yeah. It's
yeah.
early days, and it still needs to be a bit more streamlined, just basically because of the infrastructure. It's not a very big place. I'd like to expand it and have say a room for each discipline, like a mold making room, etc. But yeah, now we're sort of, if they need to do hair work, I'll hire an extra room and set up in there. It's a bit more nomadic, approach my business, but living in London, that sometimes is a necessity because of the prices there.
Yeah. Let's see. So the next question we got was, we slightly touched upon it already, is if there are advantages that animatronics have over CGI, also regarding costs.
Costs, there is certain advantages. I think, although CG is getting cheaper and cheaper, I think, out of my experience, is that sometimes an animatronic can still be a bit cheaper. But I'm sure the day will come that it's on a level playing field, if it's not already. I think where we can save a bit of money is maybe when you build one creature and it's good, you can use it for multiple shots, multiple scenes. And I'm not an expert in CG, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but I'm sure that they will have to charge by the scene, by the frame, you name it. With the creature, you charge once and you charge an onset rate. But then you pretty much have it there. You can film on it. So I assume in that respect, it's a little bit cheaper. The other reason people would choose an animatronic over CG is through personal choice. I'll be very honest. It's very much what your preference is. If you want like nostalgia in your film and you like the grittiness of real creatures, you would use a real creature. If you want something extremely dynamic and flawless, you'll go for CGs. I think at the moment it's very much a personal choice, although by far CG gets used the most. I'm not going to deny that. I think there's been a slight little renaissance in practical effects through maybe the urges of the audience. Maybe people want to see that again. Maybe because the generation now in power is my generation. The big filmmakers, J.J. Abrams, a little bit older than me, but it's still from that era where you grow up and see all the practical effects. So there's that slight bit of nostalgia, and they want to reintroduce it. So I think that there's two things at play. There's also the demand of the audience. When we did Star Wars, they really wanted to see tangible things in real sets, real creatures.
Yeah.
So it's also people or executive producers and directors listening to their audiences.
Yeah.
But I hope it's there to stay, to be honest. I hope people keep doing it. And what I find at the moment is a good understanding between the CG department and practical effects, and they start to work together a bit more.
Yeah.
The creative effects, I'd say 90% is still CG.
Yeah. Yeah.
There.
Well, yeah, there should be a healthy mix, I guess. I personally enjoy like when there's like close-ups or anything. I really appreciate when it's an animatronic.
Yeah.
It's preference, I guess.
I think the nicest effects are created with the mix of both.
Yeah.
Where CG enhances practical effects and vice
Yeah.
versa.
Yeah.
And I like it when people are not afraid to use real techniques. I think that's almost becoming a bit of a bragging rights, to say, "Ooh, we did that shot real," like Mad Max.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost like the reverse world now.
Yeah.
Where they said, "Can you believe that's all digital?" Now they say, "Ooh, it's all real," and people are, "No way, is that?" That is almost becoming a more of an achievement now.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, exactly. What was the most challenging character that you've worked on in terms of mechanical complexity?
The most challenging one.
Yeah.
There's been quite a few. Well, which one was that? They're all challenging. Some go easy than others. I think it's my most recent film, which I can't name, and a character I can't name. That was very complex.
Yeah, we'll have to wait for that.
What I always find complex is tiny babies, animatronic babies, because you have to deal with thin limbs that have to move fluently.
Yeah.
I always find they're very challenging, and also because they are realistic, and it's something we know.
Yeah.
And what is also technically very challenging is human heads, for the same reason, because there is no escaping. With a creature, it moves a bit funny. You go, oh, what?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. Who's
Yeah.
going to see it? But yeah, I'd say very realistic. Mainly humans and babies are technically very unforgiving. And you don't do it right, it just gives away the game.
Yeah.
So I would say that.
What happens to the characters or the props that you make after the movie? Like, where does it go? Does it go like in storage?
It goes whoever the production company is. Big films, they will go in storage, and it becomes the property of the studio or the production company. If you strike a good deal with commercial or a smaller film, you say, look, I'll do this for a certain amount of money, but I want to keep all the stuff.
Yeah.
Then you get to keep it.
Yeah.
But I'd say on the more films where it's all very sensitive what you build, they keep it instantly. It goes under lock and key, and they might, release it again when there's a premiere or they want to reshoot something, but it's all very guarded. It's all their property, which I understand, they pay for it, so it's it belongs to them. Yeah.
Are there certain developments in technology, for example, I don't know, artificial muscles or anything in those fields that have really helped you or that are really changing and helping you to create better animatronics?
I think it's I think the real breakthroughs are in the control systems, how complex and how nuanced you can make it. And then, together with servos becoming smaller and stronger, you can put more in it, development in silicons, skins. But in the end of the day, we still use techniques from the 80s, so it's not like the digital revolution where things just move at an incredible rate. So if anything, I think it's more, if you look at robotics, it's the AI side that
it's still the software then, I guess.
The software that just propels it, again, I'm not a robotics expert. I do animatronics, so I'm not nowhere near as advanced as, say, Boston Dynamics. But if I see how those robots balance themselves, I go, man, this is incredible software, to relay it to all the motors. I sort of get the mechanics, although I bet you those motors cost a fortune and are
Yes.
beautifully engineered with no backlash. I sort of get that, but how they're operated, you know, the
Yeah.
brains of it, I think therein lies a real, the advance is phenomenal, you know, because mechanics can be extremely sophisticated, but it still comes down to metal frames, very beautiful motors, you know, beautifully made on bearings, but without a beautiful control system, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And I find it with my animatronics as well. If I did a head for a Solo that has, I can say that now because it's released and it's online, and it had 6 eyes on stalks like that. And I approached it like any other animatronics. There goes the servo, blah, 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 blah. Make sure it works well. But then that's it. I couldn't have made it move like in sync. So I gave it to Matt Denton, and he went to work with it, and he just introduced he put a gyro in it so they would bob around when the head moved, and you know, the actor looked sideways, and they were like, would look sideways, but not in one mechanical moment, but one would sort of track, and amazing, all the nuances, and that was through his software. So that's one with 6 eyes, and it's set at a sabacc table, and they're playing this poker game, in which I think it's Lando Calrissian loses the Millennium Falcon.
All right. Yeah.
To Han Solo, and we made it's like almost like a Western dimly lit, and we made loads of creatures that sit around a table playing some kind of made up card game, you know. And one of the characters was 6 eyes who sits next to Han Solo, and you know, the good thing was you could cheat because one eye could sort of go to the left and look into his card.
Very handy for cards.
That was a perfect example of how a good control system can enhance an animatronic that has 50 motors. Trying to control that with your hands is going to be very difficult.
Yeah. Cool. So this kind of follows up on that, but I was wondering, like, what is your Mona Lisa, or to stay with our Dutch heritage, what is your night watch? What's the piece that you are most proud of that you can talk about? Yeah.
Well, there's several. There is one movie I did not long ago, which I can't mention, and I did a character, and that was a collaboration between me and my colleagues, and that was absolutely beautiful. You know, I'm not going to name what it is, but
because the movie's is the movie not out yet?
No.
Oh, okay.
But it was phenomenal. It was just coming together of people that are very good at their jobs, and I was a part of it. You know, so it was, you know, I'm like 10%, but that was amazing. Yeah, it was very rewarding. And then 6 eyes from Solo is definitely, again, by no means just through my makings. As I said, the guy Matt Denton, he did the programming, really made it special. But for me, it was a beautiful mechanic and a really well working head. Another thing I'm really proud of is the 2 human heads I did, the one for Prometheus and the one for World's End. Again, the one for World's End, a very simple head, but when a team works well together, that's as satisfying as building something very good on your own.
Yeah.
Everybody just did an amazing job.
Yeah, that thing was incredible. Like that's how you got on my radar. Actually, like I've seen it, and it's just like it's unbelievable. It's incredible. Yeah.
And I'm very proud of that, but by no means that's because of my animatronics is that good. It's just because everybody involved did the best job they could.
Yeah.
You know, the paint job was immaculate.
Yeah.
The hair, and that's there, and you see how important everybody's job is.
Yeah.
If the paint job wasn't good, it wouldn't be as good. You know, it would be like, oh yeah, that's fake. If the hair work wasn't good, they go, that's fake.
Yeah.
So everybody's input makes it beautiful. So I'm very proud of that. And then I did a swimming Oompa Loompa for Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Again, not the most spectacular mechanism, but it just on the day worked perfectly. And it meant a lot to me. And I'm also very proud of the Vogons for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's too much to mention, you know.
Yeah.
There's elements. I can never say this one animatronic is the ultimate.
Yeah. So I'm aware of your time, Gustav. So I'm going to ask you one more question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because I have so many. There is we kind of touch upon it, like how do you get into VFX? But there was like a ton of questions about like what do I study? You know, what field should I pursue academically to get into doing what you're doing? What would you advise? You know, like is it robotics engineering or is it electronics? Could you tell a bit more about that?
That's quite tricky. There is not a real study that will, launch you into the animatronics field.
Yeah.
Because we have people from a lot of backgrounds. You can be a marine biologist and be drawn by, to animatronics.
Yeah.
That's a tricky one because if you study mechanical engineering, you can probably build the hell out of a robot, but you still have to have the understanding of, the artistry behind it, how to make things, come to life, and you have a certain interest in biology and nature, animals, you name it. So I find it a very hard one to answer. What should I study? I think study something that comes close to it, has elements.
Yeah.
And then try your luck in the business and then learn it that way, because there is not a course that completely takes you from A to B what animatronics is concerned. So it's not like a car designer where there's rules, and there is a much bigger industry for it as well.
Yeah. Study something great and get an internship with you.
If they show any promise and interest in it,
yeah,
you can be a butcher. I don't mind. If they show some promise, then you can learn it in the trade. And that's pretty much how you learn it. It's a very unconventional business, the film game.
Yeah.
People come in from all kinds of backgrounds and learn it on the job. Yeah.
All right. So where can people learn more about you and your work, Gustav?
Well, on my website, that started by www.biomimicstudios.org.
All right.
I don't even know my own website address. But no, check out my YouTube channel, Gustav Hoegen, and that's where you got all the information. There's links to my website.
Your website has incredible case studies as well, so there should be a lot.
And more about my works, type in my name. There's a few interviews online. Etc. Yeah, you dig deep, you'll find something.
Of course. Well, that was it, Gustav. It was a real pleasure from my end. I really enjoyed it. I hope we can see more of your work coming out in the next few years. I hope you'll start creating also more reels that we can share, of course.
I'm working on one, 2019, which is nearly over now. I've been putting it off and off because I've been busy, and one will come out. I want to bring one out very soon to reignite the interest. Hello, Ilva. Okay. That's my daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, you okay, Ilva? Yeah.
You can join.
We're still talking.
Hey.
There you go.
We're still talking.
You can come now. Are you okay? Yeah. So that's the show reel is coming very soon, I hope.
Okay.
It's been a long time. It's going to be nearly 8 years since I.
It's definitely time. It's definitely time. Cool.
The only problem is though, because I've been working on Star Wars, they're very strict with what you can release. So
I can imagine.
It will just be already released stuff online.
All right.
It was pretty enough to fill a show.
Yeah. We're going to keep an eye on you.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I hope you've inspired a new generation of animatronic engineers, and hopefully they'll, if they're good, they can at one point work with you as well.
I hope so too. We need to pass on the torch,
Yes.
Keep it alive, definitely.
Cool. Yeah. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, Gustav, and
Thank you.
We'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.